Hi, this is Caroline from The Happy Sensitive. Today I want to talk with you about narcissism and why is it that some people see narcissism when it's happening and a lot of people don't. So I have a lot of clients who are the only ones who see narcissism in the workplace or narcissism in, a group of people that they know. And of course, right now we're dealing with worldwide narcissism. And so your question might be, why is it that not everybody is seeing it? Why are there so many people who just somehow seem to feel like everything is just fine and they're not really noticing that something is really, really off, right? And I've been thinking about this too, and there's various kinds of answers to this, but one of the answers has to do with people's family background. So I'm gonna tackle that question from this angle. Why is it that so many people do not see narcissism when it's happening right under their nose on a really, really big scale? Okay, so first off, you can kind of split society into like people coming from two different families. And I know this is an overgeneralization, but we're gonna kind of create a kind of simplistic model here to kind of understand all the different factors that have to do with family conditioning. Okay, so for the purpose of this question, why don't people see narcissism? You can imagine there's people who come from a family where there was significant narcissism, right? And there's people who come from a healthy, loving family where there was no narcissism. So you've got these two groups. Now, within those two groups, there's all kinds of subdivisions. So let's go into that. Let's start with the healthy family group, because those are the easiest subdivisions. So somebody comes from a healthy family, and so they know what a loving family looks like, but just because they know what a healthy family looks like doesn't mean that they also are realistic about the fact that not everybody has a family like them, right? So there are people who come from a healthy family who simply cannot imagine that not every mother loves their child and that not every father is supportive and cares about his kids, right? They just can't imagine it because they haven't gone through it. And we live in a society where regardless of which family you come from, there is still this idea, there's still this myth that of course your mother loves you, of course your father loves you. And when you have a narcissistic parent, that's just not true. They don't know what love is. They don't know what it means to love someone. They might use the word, but it doesn't really mean love. Okay, so that's the first thing. It's somebody coming from a healthy family may not realize that there are actually truly families that are not so healthy. And that may seem outrageous to you if you know that obviously there are some very unhealthy families out there. But this happened in history too. This happened with famines, for example. I remember once when I went to Ireland and went to this museum, it was about the Irish potato famine. And the Irish potato famine was huge and people were dying because there was a disease that spread across the land that killed the potatoes and people didn't have any food. And the nobility in London, a lot of them didn't believe this was actually happening, which, if like to many of you listening here, that's going to sound insane, but they really did not believe that people might be dying because there were no potatoes to eat. And so that exists in many different variations. I once went to a workshop that I participated in where we had to describe and kind of create some kind of symbolic visual version of family. And the person leading it said, well, okay, so a family, so a harmonious system, people loving you. And I said, wait a minute, do you mean family or do you mean a harmonious system of people loving you? And everybody looked at me like I was just completely crazy. Like, what is she talking about, right? So, and also that it was a very shocking thing to say, to separate out those two and to say that family is not necessarily a loving community of people who care about each other. And so there are a lot of people out there who are just like, what do you mean maybe your mother didn't love you? And those are also the people who say that if you distance yourself from your family or you go no contact, that there must be something wrong with you. And of course your mother loves you and she must be so upset and she must be so worried, all that kind of stuff. So this is real. This is real. And if if you see narcissism, right, you're like, how can people not see this? A lot of people don't see this, right? And so one of the explanations is they did not go through the experience themselves. Of course, there are also people who had a loving, caring family and who are able to compare that, they have an open mind and they realize not everybody has that same background, and they can compare it to what they see happening around them, and they come to the conclusion, oh, wait a minute, that's not happening everywhere, right? So coming from a healthy, loving family doesn't mean that you can't see it. It could mean that you very well see it because you actually know what a healthy family looks like, and you can compare and contrast, and you see, wait a minute, this is not healthy. This is not love. This is not good that I'm seeing out there. But it can be either. That's the thing. So having that healthy background can lead you to not see things, and it can also lead you to see things. And of course, the potato famine is not about narcissism. It's more about people not being able to understand that what they have is not something that everybody has. And just because they're doing okay doesn't mean everybody's doing okay, right? That kind of cognitive dissonance. And that happens as well with narcissism. So some people just can't imagine that because they're doing okay and their family's okay, that other families may not be. It's just too much of a strange idea for them to kind of wrap their minds around. Okay, so we've got that side of the issue, and then we've got the people who come from an unhealthy family. Now here's where it gets complicated. When you come from an unhealthy family with a narcissistic or two narcissistic parents, you have a few choices in how to get through life and how to deal with that. One is you can become a narcissist just like the strong parent is, right? You see that the person who's most narcissistic gets their way, bosses everyone around, gets what they want, and so you see that and you decide that's who I need to be. And a lot of people do that. Or you can be the one who says, I'm never going to be like that. So you go to the codependent side. You're the one who's always supportive, like helping everyone out, and you're putting yourself last. And so in that division itself, if you are someone, well, then you're probably not going to be listening to this video, right? But the people who chose for the narcissistic solution, when they look at their parents, they don't see a problem. They don't see the narcissistic parent as a problem. They see that person as strong and capable and worthy and fantastic, right? So the kids who chose that are not going to see and spot or see a problem with any narcissism in a workplace or in a group of people or in a society or in a government. They're not going to see it because they figure that's just what strength looks like. That's what leadership looks like. Now, for the people who chose a codependent path, there are a lot of hurdles on the way to seeing narcissism, because just because it happened to you doesn't mean you actually see it. When you end up on the codependent side of all this, you have a lot to get through before you actually see that it wasn't your fault, it wasn't you. You had a very unhealthy family system that you grew up in, and that caused a lot of the pain that you experienced. But it takes a long time often to come to the place where, first of all, you're willing to acknowledge that maybe there's something wrong with your family, right? That's a big hurdle. That's a big thing to step over, because there's that boundary of, the hallmark illusion of course your family loves you. And if you're willing to see that maybe they don't, it's also this big disillusion. And it's a very painful moment of realizing maybe there wasn't really any love. Yes, they got you dressed and they sent you to school and all of that, but like actual love, actual caring about you as a person with feelings, maybe that wasn't there, right? So that's the first hurdle you have to take if you're on the codependent side, is you have to see that pain, acknowledge that pain, and then you have to go through the healing process of going through all the layers of everything you've kind of gone through as a kid and reorganizing that, in the sense that as a kid you learned, oh, this means I am stupid, this means I am wrong, this means I have to try harder. You have to go through all that and be like, wait a minute, I don't think that means that I was wrong. I don't think it means I had to try harder. I think that means that my family was unhealthy, and maybe, my mom was a bully or whatever it was, right? And that takes a lot of work, and it takes a long time to get through. because you have to get through it to the end. And a lot of people don't. A lot of people get halfway. So they get halfway enough where they can point to the narcissism, they can complain about it to friends, but they keep calling mom every week, or they keep showing up for sick dad and taking care of sick dad, even though sick dad is abusive. Okay, so there are a lot of people in that process of coming out of codependence who kind of get stuck halfway, and a lot of people just never get beyond that phase. They're still in that phase of trying to fix it. They're still trying to make it better. They're still trying to somehow fix the unfixable. Because even though they can see that that's narcissism they're dealing with, they haven't really owned fully emotionally what that means. So they still think that somehow they can magically make it okay. And so they stay in that codependent pattern of trying harder, even though they have the right labels for things, they have not really embodied what that means emotionally. Because here's the hard part. If you're from a narcissistic family, the only way you're going to see narcissism out there, you're really going to spot it, is if you've gone through your healing work, your healing journey, and not just intellectually, but emotionally. So you have really learned to feel and honor your own feelings and decipher what they mean, to the point where when your body's telling you something's off, you don't just dismiss that. You don't just push that away. Because the thing is, if you have codependent conditioning, your instincts, as they have been shaped by your family, are going to be, if there's a narcissist on the scene, the first thing you're going to do is figure out, what do I need to do to make them feel good? What do I need to do to make them happy? What do I need to do to make them relax? So that means if there's a narcissist on the scene, you're going to be the teacher's pet. You're going to be their assistant. That's what you're automatically going to do, one way or the other. So just because you come from a family where that was going on, just because you can kind of maybe name it, doesn't mean you see it yet, because seeing it means feeling it. Feeling it means you're grounded in your own body enough, you've gone through enough healing, that you're trusting your own observations, and that you don't go into that stress pattern of, I need to do what they want, right? So when there's a big narcissist who arrives on the scene, you can see there's a lot of different people who just kind of get into line. You've got the people who are narcissists themselves, who are like, great, this is an amazing leader. You've got the people who just don't see it because they can't imagine that anybody would be that awful, right? So they come from a healthy family. They just can't imagine that anybody would be this bad. It's just not in their realm of possibilities. So narcissists can do horrible things right under their nose and tell them lies about it, and they're gonna just take the lies, because seeing how awful and even evil things can really get, that's just not anywhere in the realm of possibilities for them to consider. And if it's not in the realm of possibilities for you to consider, then any indication that something really bad is going on, you're going to dismiss that as, oh, I'm sure it's not so bad. I'm sure it's okay. I'm sure it'll work itself out. I'm sure they mean well, right? And so a lot of narcissistic people can do what they're doing right in the open with really, really subtle, well, not subtle, really, really obvious lies. And a lot of people are not going to see it because they can't believe it's that bad, or they're narcissists themselves and they think this is great, or they come from a family where they dealt with parents like this, right? They haven't gone through their whole healing process yet. And so now instinctively, emotionally, their whole system is on high alert and knows, uh-oh, we need to get in line. We need to make this person feel good. We need to tell them what they want, because that's how you survived as a kid, right? And by the way, that doesn't mean that you're a pushover. It doesn't mean that you're just always groveling or anything. I know it kind of sounds like that right now. This happens to very capable, strong, assertive people. But there's just something in that dynamic where if you have experienced that with parents who obviously are strong, if you're a little kid and your parents are like this, you have no options. You can't negotiate with them. You can't say, well, I'm just going to take myself to child services, thank you very much, and I'm out of here. You don't have those kinds of options, right? So you have to kind of make do with the parents, and the only way to make do with a narcissistic person and create a little bit of stability and peace is give them what they want. Because they always want things, and they always want things very badly, and they always get very upset, and they turn into bullies when they don't get what they want. So in some way or another, you have learned to give them what they want, or to hide, but at least not confront them, not call them out, not fight with them. Because if you tried to fight with them, and you have learned that you will be squashed. Because narcissists do not tolerate that you stand up against them. And even though you may have the ability to stand up against them as an adult, as a kid, you don't, right? And so, at some point you may do, or you may leave, you may just get away from there. But when you're small, you don't have that power, you don't have that choice. And so that's been wired into your system, that you just got to submit somehow. And that wiring, that fear takes over when there is a narcissist in power in a group of people you're a part of, or in a company, or in government, and you're suddenly like looking at your childhood, but now it's in big, it's like there's a big version of it out there. Like before it was, okay, well, this family dynamic sucks, but I can get out of that and get away from these people. Now suddenly it's, again, a situation where you can't get out of it. So it's going to activate all those fears, all those insecurities, all that pain from the past. Anything you haven't dealt with is going to come up. And so that means the only people who have that codependent past, who can stand up against a narcissism in power, are the people who have gone through the whole healing journey. And a lot of people just haven't, right? So a lot of people get stuck in this place of feeling fearful, feeling confused, feeling overwhelmed, having an idea of what it's about, but not really. And this is how narcissists take power. There's very few people who see it. There's very few people who are able to stand up against it. And they can basically do whatever they want under people's nose. Okay, so that sounds really depressing, right? And if you do see it, you might feel like, I need to get everybody on board. I need to show them that this is a narcissistic, horrible person. But I think that is not the right strategy to take. Because remember, there are a lot of people who have their own reasons for not seeing this, right? For the people who had a good family, like a healthy family, seeing this, like, why would they want to see this? Why would they want to see that there are people out there who are just horrible human beings and who don't give a shit about others? Why would they want to see that? It's not a fun thing to see, right? It was not a fun thing for you to see. It's a really painful thing to come to terms with. So it's not about making people see. If you want to make people see, you need to make them feel. You need to make them feel horrible things about the world they don't want to feel about the world. I mean, good luck with that, right? And so that's probably not going to work. Like, some people might get to that point where they realize, like, holy shit, I thought everyone was basically a good person, but there are some really, really, really dark people out there, and they don't care about what happens to anyone else. Oh my God, I never realized. Like, some people will get there, but a lot of people will not. And when you understand that people have a lot of inner baggage around this, and that they can't see it because they can't feel it, right? You can't see narcissism if you can't feel it, if you can't feel your own authentic reaction to those people. Because your brain will take over and make stories. Oh, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's not so bad. I'm sure they mean well. So you need to already be in a place where you have really learned to just pause, feel what's happening in your body, feel your reactions, and not try to smooth it over with a cute story, right? And again, if you try to drag people into that space, where you try to rip away all their cute, soothing stories, and you try to make them feel the horror, that's really hard. It's also kind of mean to try to do that to someone, right? Like what are you trying to do? Yeah, you're trying to wake them up, but like, what are you really trying to do here? They're not going to see that as you trying to wake them up. They're going to see that as you kind of like abusing them about their worldview, because they like their worldview just fine as it is. Okay, so that's not the way to go with this. So the way to go is not to wake everyone up about the deepest, darkest reality. The way to go is much more superficial. the way to go is realizing, okay, seeing the fact that a lot of people are never really going to see this. How can we get people on board with a direction that takes us away from the power of these narcissistic people? How can we get everyone on board with something else that diminishes the power of these people? Or how can we call for an investigation into something that everybody understands is wrong? They don't have to understand the deep, dark depths of how wrong it is. They just need to see it's wrong enough to be able to get these people out of power, to be able to get, to get management on board and see, okay, what the boss did here is truly not okay, right? It's a little bit like the mobster movies, where they're trying to, the intelligence agencies are trying to get a criminal organization, trying to roll it up. But they know they don't really have the deep, dark evidence they ideally would want of what's actually happening. So they get them on tax fraud or something, right? And it can be frustrating because nobody's ever going to see the truth, but it's practical. It's like, we need to get these people off the streets. The only thing we can get them on is tax fraud. Let's do that. It's the same kind of strategy. It's saying we don't need to we can't show everyone how bad and how deep this goes. We just can't convince people. We don't have the evidence that we can show people. That's never going to happen. But we do have this thing. And if we can show people this thing, they're going to boot this person out. Or they're going to stop listening to this person because they realize they're lying. Or, so it's a different strategy. But you have to kind of accept that a lot of people are never going to see it, right? And that's hard, obviously. But I think it's understandable when you remember all the shit you had to go through to get to the point where you could actually see it. All the emotional shit. Because it's not fun. Like, was it a fun journey to realize that narcissism is real and what these people are capable of and that they don't care and how they play others and get everybody on board, and all those people don't realize what's happening? Is it fun to see that? Is it like, you're like, yeah, I'm so glad? Like, no, right? It was a horrific process. It was a nightmare process of starting to see that. So a lot of people are never going to go there if they don't have to. That's the thing. And don't try to make them. Just see what needs to happen for this narcissistic influence to wane. How do we get people on board with something that they actually can see already and they already believe in, that they already understand? Okay, and lastly, there are going to be a lot of times where you feel like none of that is really, where maybe you don't see a way out, right? You're like, these people have so much power, nobody wants to see what they're doing, and I can't think of anything to stop it. There's always something you can do that has to do with your inner reality. And I know that might sound kind of woo-woo, airy-fairy, like how does that even happen or help? But the more that you are triggered by narcissists, the more that they can stir up fear and frustration and old wounds inside of you, the more power they have. Because whether you like it or not, that signal of panic and, oh my God, they're in power, like they have all the power, that signal is going to amplify through you. Whereas if you have gotten to the point where you have gotten all the traumatic stuff out of your system and you can see what's happening, you're not blind to it, but you're also not crashing in a heap over it. You're not panicking about it. You're not losing yourself over it. Then that stops some of their influence. That's a very, very powerful thing. And it's not easy, okay? Because you might think that you have healed from your past and you're doing fine now, but things change when suddenly the narcissist is your boss, or the narcissist is the president, or the narcissist is, in companies running the world worldwide. Suddenly the scale changes, and if there's any kind of old trauma still in your system, you're going to feel it, right? And in that moment, it's very tempting to try to fight an impossible fight or lose yourself in despair against people who are way, way more powerful than you, basically putting you back in that situation you were in when you were a kid, right? Where they're just way more powerful. What can you do? And this is where you need to regroup. And this is where I believe it's really powerful to do the inner healing work. Do the inner healing work so that you can regroup internally and you stop amplifying their propaganda, because they have a lot of propaganda and it amplifies through people's fear, through people's panic. This is how they have influence, right? And so if you're panicking along, whether it's panicking because of what they're doing or what they're saying, or that people are not seeing it, but you're panicking along, then you're spreading this panic, which gives them more influence. So just making that panic stop with you is very powerful, but it's not something you can just decide in your head to make happen, right? You got to be really honest and realize, like, wait a minute, I'm getting really affected by this. I am getting really depressed about this. I'm getting really panicked about this. I am going under in what's happening. I need to attend to what's happening inside of me. And so I believe that's a very, very powerful thing. That you can make their influence stop with you, and you may not think that's a very powerful thing, but other people are watching you. Other people are watching you. And if you do not submit to the narcissistic bullshit, if you're just like, nah, I'm not doing that, but you're calm about it, you're not like, oh, what are they going to do now? You're just like, no, I'm not on board with this. I'm not participating in this. Other people are watching you, and you're really creating a new possibility for them, even when they don't really see what's going on, they really don't understand what's going on, but there's just something in their system that's like, this whole thing is kind of off, and I'm not sure how. And then they see all these people panicking and doing things, and they say you, and you're just like, no, I'm not doing that. And suddenly that becomes an option. And they don't even know why that's important, or why that's attractive, or why that's helpful, but something in them is going to say, like, look at that person. That's interesting. Right? So it's more than fighting narcissism. It's sometimes there's not really much you can do to fight it, but it's about being the alternative, creating the alternative. Sometimes all you can do is just be an alternative point of view and an alternative point of feeling. Sometimes that's all you can do, but it's a very powerful thing, because a lot of the changes that need to happen, they start small, and then they build and they build and they build and they build. And so when you're in a position where you're the first one in a particular situation to see it, the change that you are going to make starts really small. It starts just with you standing your ground, and emotionally, intellectually, your whole being, if you can be in this state of, no, I'm not doing this, I'm not participating, that is the beginning of the alternative. And narcissists rule through cutting off alternatives, killing alternatives, right? They're just like, all the alternatives have got to go. There's just one way. Everybody has to get on board with this one way. This is how they rule. So as long as you can be an alternative, as long as you can see an alternative, as long as you can represent an alternative, you're doing something. But it's a very different kind of something from trying to fight them or trying to make people see them who they really are, right? Because then you're up against all those emotional hurdles of how people want to see the world, what people want to believe. If you try to pull that away from someone, somebody has a belief about how the world works, and you're like, no, it's much darker than that, you're going to destabilize people, right? You're just yanking that rug of their worldview from below their feet. That's not going to go over well. So you want to build on what people already believe and what they're already seeing, And that's where you can wake someone up. You can wake someone up and see like, hey, but this is what you already believe in, this is what you're already seeing, and this is what's going on that level, right? But don't try to drag up the deep, dark, bottom bullshit that's going on with this narcissist or these narcissists that you see, because it's going to be, 20 bridges too far for many people, and then they're just going to shut it down. And then the I'm sure it's fine, I'm sure it's going to be okay stories are going to come in, and they're not going to listen to anything you're saying, right? And this is where sometimes it's probably going to be more powerful and more useful, where if you feel like nobody's listening to you and nobody takes you seriously, to see that as, wait a minute, this is also your own trauma replaying. This feeling of nobody sees what I see, nobody hears me, nobody understands it, that loneliness that comes with it. So this is actually a moment to pull back, regroup, check in with your own feelings, work on your own trauma, because there is still trauma there, and that is absolutely normal. But again, you're gonna look like the crazy one when you're running around. You're like, oh my God, people, you got it. And then you're in that panic too, right? It's a different kind of panic, but then you're also in the panic. You're also doing the running around. So the hardest thing in seeing narcissism is going to be that every single time you have to go and ground and get back to yourself and check in with yourself. Like, how are you doing with all of this? How are you feeling? What is getting stirred up? And that is probably a checking in and like healing work that you're going to have to keep doing on an ongoing basis, because as the narcissism that you're dealing with gets bigger, new stuff gets stirred up. And I'm not saying that there's going to be like an ongoing like healing process that'll just like every single day you have to do huge deep healing or something like that. No, that's not what I mean. But I mean, you have to be vigilant and realize you may think you're done, and then you might be up against something and realize all kinds of stuff is getting stirred up and you're not done. And instead of trying to convince people or trying to get people on board or fight things out there, you have to go back inside and see, what am I wrestling with in here, right? What is the stuff from the past that's coming up that's getting triggered now? Because as all of that stuff is getting triggered and stirred up, that if you allow that to continue, that is giving the narcissist more power. And what you need to do is be present with those old feelings, check in with those old beliefs. There needs to be a lot of acknowledging, being present with, and also letting go of old stuff until you feel stable again and you feel like, okay, now, even when all that is going on, I am able to be calm and stable and stand my ground. That's the biggest job that you have. Without that, everything else falls, right? So that's really important to remember, because it's so easy to get lost in the fight and the frustration out there about narcissists being in power, about narcissists lying to people and doing whatever they want. Now, this is also good news if you don't feel like much of an activist, right? I work with highly sensitive people, empaths, people in between. We tend to get more overwhelmed more quickly by stuff like loud noises and lots of people. And so we tend to, I think, I haven't polled this, but I think we tend to not be the loud protest types, because this is exactly the kind of thing that gets us overwhelmed and exhausted and that drains our energy. And so you have to think about, well, what are some other things that I can do? And it starts with you being an alternative point of feeling for the people around you. And you don't have to try to convince everyone of what you're seeing, but you have to check in with yourself and notice, like, are you still stable? Are you still feeling calm? Are you still feeling inspired? And if you're not, step back and do that inner work. Now, when I say do the inner work, I actually don't mean talk therapy, because talk therapy has its place, but it doesn't actually help you get through stuff like this. There is a two-prong approach. You need a way to get in touch with deep feelings and understand why those are there, what they're trying to tell you. We don't have a lot of that in our society. In our society, there's a lot of this like top-down approach to feelings. This idea that feelings are just a result of thoughts. And if you change your thoughts, you change your feelings. That's only half of the picture. That's only half of what's going on. People who are up in their head a lot, for sure, everything they're thinking, everything that's going on up here is going to create an emotional reaction, yes. But your traumas are actually a lot of it consists of really true, authentic, rational feelings. They make sense. They're not bullshit. They're not just the result of some faulty idea, and they need to be felt and they need to be processed through. Otherwise, they keep coming up and they keep getting stirred up. And then you end up having this battle inside of yourself trying to squash your own feelings. And you may not realize, but then you end up fighting with the feelings out there and how everything makes you feel out there as well. Everything becomes a battle then. So it's like the more you see the narcissism out there that other people don't see, the more you need to attend to your inner work, because you will get triggered and upset in many little different ways by the narcissist and also by the people who don't see it, right? So you need to really check in and notice, like, how am I doing with all of this? Now, if you'd like some help with that, if you're going through a phase where you're like, I was doing good, but now I'm kind of losing it, this is what I help people with, okay? I have a program, it's called Narcissist. We work on this stuff. I teach you how to find the inner patterns that are making you feel a little wonky and how to get those out. So if you'd like to learn more about that, you can go to my website and go to my coaching tab and look for the No to Narcissist program, and all the information about that is right there. This is really important, and I think it's easy to underestimate what impact it has when sometimes all you can do is just be an alternative point of feeling. All right, I hope that was helpful. Thanks so much for listening. Bye-bye.